Is true horror seeing something approach, or is it not seeing it until it's much too late? PseudoPod is a horror podcast. Consider this a warning. PseudoPod, episode 874, July 14th, 2023. Flash on the Borderlands 67, which is LXVII for all you Roman numerals fans. Ichthyic. Stories by Michelle Muensler, Anna Madden and Antoinette Ryder. Narration by Tina Connolly, Lisa Wood and Austin Malone. Audio production by Chelsea Davis. Hosted by Alistair Stewart. Fishing is a discipline in the equality of men. For all men are equal before fish. Hey everyone, welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast, in an episode which, let's face it, my entire childhood on the Isle of Man could safely be viewed as a training montage for the hosting duties thereof. This week we have 3 stories of oceanic horror, benthic terror if you will, 3 stories as relentless as the sea itself, and they start with Bitter is the Sea and Bright by Michelle Muensler. This was first published in Daily Science Fiction in November 2018. Michelle is an author of the weird and sometimes poet who writes things both dark and strange to counterbalance the sweetness of her baking. I know how she feels. Her short fiction and poetry can be read in numerous magazines. Please check out the links we'll leave in the show notes for her on that to find out more. Likewise for your narrator for this story, who is one of my favourite podcasters ever, the legendary Tina Connolly. It is so good to have you back with us, buddy. So, cast the shells. Read the truth.
Bitter is the Sea and Bright by Michelle Muensler. Narrated by Tina Connolly. When the Isperfell come to our village of Merse by the sea, it is not with their delicate bone-lattice knives readied and their faces painted for war. No. They approach the old way, slowly, and from just down the shore, emerald seawater cascading from their bright scales and lean arms opened wide. Their needled teeth gleam. "We stay," they say, though it takes us some moments to make out the words, the long jaws of the Isperfell not being made for human speech. But once the words are known, we do what any other village clinging to survival among these remote shores would do in our place. We greet our new guests as in the old stories, a pained smile on every face, and welcome them to our houses to stay. It's the price of the sea, after all, one that every village knows it will someday pay. They were 7 days the last time they stayed, or so say our elders with their shaking voices and trembling hands clutched against their chests. 7 days and 7 nights, and half a morning spent watching them go. And that time the host village was lucky. That time the Isperfell left on their own. We at Merse by the sea are not so blessed. Which is why, when the 10th day approaches, shells are pulled from a dusty bag long set aside for just this purpose, and Lena, who just finished suckling her first child and is thick with another, draws the lone striped one. Several question the wisdom of the bag's choosing, but in the end it is agreed that not even the Isperfell, incomprehensible though they may be, would be so cruel as to separate mother from child. Trembling, Lena approaches a smaller Isperfell with scales like blue glass, and asks if they are ready yet to go. Gentle, like Lena to her own child, the Isperfell pulls her into its loose embrace. One webbed claw rests atop her broad belly, and its long snout nuzzles against her cheek. The pulse along Lena's neck throbs. Then, whisper fast, the Isperfell slides its bone-lattice knife across her throat. "We stay," says the Isperfell, cupping Lena to its concave chest. Her fish gasps spill blood and bright ribbons to the floor, until there is no more to spill, and only then is she discarded from the Isperfell's embrace. We linger awake through the night, stomachs heaving. But come morning we force the smiles back into our faces. wait for the Isperfell to indicate they were done with us at last, that Lena's sacrifice was of worth. The Isperfell, however, remain, smiling with their sly fish-pin teeth and watching us even as we watch them in return. At 20 days, our stores of smoked fish and preserves are gone. Yet still we do our best to weather the unfathomable storm that is the Isperfell. This remote village is our home, after all. This sea, our blood. Hungered, our children take to trapping the small rats that creep through the stores at night and act the Isperfell ignore. Less acceptable is the young couple that decides to toss their nets into the shallows, despite all warnings from the elders. To that, the Isperfell take great offense. The Isperfell do not bother with their knives for the couple. Their teeth are sharp enough. And so we stick to trapping rats, to ravaging our gardens before their season, to slaughtering what few milk goats can be spared, and also praying to whatever gods will listen that the Isperfell do not take further offense, that they do not decide to go to war. Of course, we also debate the choosing bag with its many shells. Some say it is time for another choosing. Only then will the Isperfell be satisfied, the villages of the sea once more let be. It is another 2 days of cramping hunger before the rest of us agree. At 30 days, the bag is much lighter of shells, and mersed by the sea much lighter of folk. Those of us that remain waste away, skin nets snagged atop bits of bone. Yet the Isperfell seemed healthy as ever, their message unchanged. "We stay," they say. Again and again, despite each sacrifice sent by the bag, we stay. On the 31st morning, we throw the bag into the sea. Shells spill into the tide along with all our faith in the promises of the old stories. Exhausted, we gather our children, our accursed elders, our sick and our hale. Every body in our village that can be offered we gather, and we stagger to the shore, wavering as the warm waters of the Emerald Sea snatch at our heels. The Isperfell gather as well just before the shore. Their scales glint in the dawn light, and they cradle their bone knives like babes. "You've stayed," we say, collapsing to our knees in supplication. "Now go." The Isperfell's teeth gleam. At random they claim us, 1 here, 2 there, and the rest of us trembling beside. Lovingly they run their knives across sun-warmed throats. Watch as our blood spills into the foaming sand. By the time the last Isperfell is gone, we who remain alive clutch at the surf with empty hands, whimpering as the water washes red around us. And starving, we crawl, first one, then the rest, into the shallows of the Emerald Sea and snatch up the small jeweled fish-like creatures that teem therein during this season. And if the prey we thrust raw and wriggling between our teeth resemble our late guests a bit closer than is comfortable, all the better, say some. For never sweeter was that bright and bitter flesh, as bright and bitter as the sea.
Wow. I'm always here for stories that methodically turn their final card while holding eye contact the whole time. Stories that don't just beat you at Find the Lady, they show you you've actually been playing 3-card Monty all along, and you've still lost. What an absolute labyrinth of horror. The Isperfell, their victims, their cruelty, the exhausted pragmatism of the villagers, and the blood-soaked murder of the finale, all wrapped up in that awful, impossible question. Who started this cycle? Whose fault is it? When did this season in hell begin? On then, to Fishing Season by Anna Madden. Anna lives in Fort Worth, Texas. Her fiction has appeared in Dark Matter magazine, Podcastle, Orion's Belt, and elsewhere. In free time, she gardens, mountain bikes, and makes stained glass. Follow her on Twitter or visit her website, as usual, links in the show notes. And this story is a PseudoPod original and is narrated for you by Lisa Wood. So lock the doors, bolt the windows, do not react to them however much you want to, because we've got a story for you. And what's whispered out there in the dark is it's true.
Fishing Season by Anna Madden. Narrated by Lisa Wood. For every soul, there's a lure on a string. There are different shapes, sizes, and colors. What snares one soul won't tempt another. During fishing season, I stay inside. The doors are dead-bolted, the windows nailed shut. Each spring, I dream of running through the orchard to collect petals off the old Benton cherry trees. What I want doesn't matter to my mother. It is for my own good. My mother says so. The thick raised scar from her lips to her right cheek, a reminder of what bobs in the breeze outside, waiting. She tells me she'd been lucky. The bloodied line had snapped when she thrashed, the treble hook biting deep. I asked her what the lure looked like. In silence, a shadow of fear clouds her eyes. Fishing season is annual and lasts 3 months. It has been going on for so long, no one asks why anymore. If you go outside, you keep your head down. You don't look. I peek out the windows. I like to watch the lines being cast. They look like hundreds of shooting stars falling. The lures twirl at the ends, dipping into the earth. The hunting lines dangle from the clouds like weeping stars. If I make a wish on one, will it come true? I'm 13, and I've grown bolder with the passing seasons. I have opinions now. I've been shut away each spring, and for what? My mother treats me like a child. I won't get caught like she did. I won't live in fear either. I make a wish, unbolt the front door, then run. My feet crush white petals collected on the porch and lawn. My shoulders brush against sticky threads like spider silk. I run onward, the lures a blur until I can't see the house when I glance behind me. There are only trees and petals and the glistening lines. I stop beneath an old Benton. My lungs burn. I gulp down breath. Among the first green leaves against naked bark, a lure catches my eye. It dances to my heartbeat on its puppet string. For each soul, there's a lure to match. I look at mine and know why my mother hadn't answered me. How could she have found the words? It is just me now, alone in the orchard, the breeze and the sunlight for my liking. There is no one to slap my hand back or tell me what I can and can't do. In the distance, I hear my mother's frantic cries. The lure is mine to find, and it is close enough to touch. So close.
Anna says, I went fishing at a nearby reservoir. I didn't catch anything except water willow and the wisps of this story's concept. And what a concept it is! There is something enticing and deeply terrifying about the idea of something larger than us feeding on us. Charles Fort once said, I think we're cattle, and that was the second thing this fantastic story put me in mind of. The first was a short movie starring Ewan McGregor very early on in his career called Desserts. We'll link to it in the show notes. That takes a, let's say, more visceral approach, but Anna takes the subtler, deeper path here. We don't know. We can't know. Survival is paramount, knowledge is secondary, and when we're stuck in that persistent cycle of reaction, well, that's when the meat is most tender. Just ask Snotty. Written by Antoinette Ryder and narrated by Austin Malone, Snotty is another PseudoPod original and closes us out this week. Antoinette is a writer and artist working in the genres of horror, science fiction, and fantasy. Antoinette Ryder is a writer and artist working in the genres of horror, science fiction, and fantasy, usually bent into a surrealist and satirical angle and injected with a healthy dose of experimentalism. She creates in a variety of mediums including prose fiction, illustration, screenplays, comic books, and graphic novels. Her collaborative series of steampunk western novels Weird Wild West debuted in 2018, and her puzzling picture book, Mr. Idealized Leaves the Building, what a great title, was published in 2021. As ever, there will be links in the show notes. But in the meantime, get ready, because we just landed the truth.
Snotty by Antoinette Ryder. Narrated by Dom Rabrun. We found him down by the swamp. A gator had his leg and was trying to drag him down, but he held on to a rock and wouldn't let go. Pa shot the gator between the eyes and hauled the boy up onto the bank. His leg was gone, bit off by the gator. The boy was strange looking, even for these parts. Looked like a person, sorta, but his head was wide and flat like a snot otter, so I called him Snotty. Had tiny eyes and a big mouth. He was naked, but had nothing between his legs. Snotty's skin was smooth and slimy with ruffly bits down the side, and his fingers were funny looking, spread out at the ends like tiny skillets. His eyes rolled back and he shivered. Wormy things came wriggling out of the stump. They tangled together and grew into a brand new leg. Pa picked up Snotty and took him home. Told what happened. Grandpa Joe said 'tweren't no boy, 'cause it had no sex. 'Tweren't no person neither, but Grandpa Joe said these critters were special. Can do things ordinary folks can't. Ma didn't believe a word, so Pa got his hunting knife and cut off Snotty's leg. Snotty let out a god-awful sound, like pain, but high-pitched and stuttery. Ma shrieked and fussed about, grabbing towels. Jethro jigged about, laughing. Sure enough, Snotty's leg grew back. Grandpa Joe took Snotty's cut-off leg, which he was special too. Had to sit in a wheelchair that Pa made 'cause he lost his own leg hunting. Then worms came out of that leg and grabbed Grandpa Joe's stump leg and growed over it. Grandpa Joe had a brand new leg, but it didn't look like Snotty's no more. Looked like it belonged to Grandpa Joe, like always. Jethro cut off his little finger. Ma yelled, slapped him in the back of the head, called him an idiot. Jethro just grinned as blood shot out. Jethro snipped a finger from Snotty's hand and held it to his bloody stump. Snotty's finger grew into where Jethro's finger used to be. Ma cleaned off the blood and Jethro's finger was like new again. Couldn't see no joint. Was like his very own. Jethro kept grinning his stupid lopsided grin, and Ma frowned with her hand on her hips. Later, folks came from all around to get some of Snotty's special healing. They bring us chickens and hogs and stuff. I felt bad each time Snotty howled, but Pa said we was doing good and helping lots of people. But I could see the hurt in Snotty's eyes. One day, Snotty grabbed Pa's hunting knife and cut his own throat and died. Then Jethro's pinky withered and had to be cut off. And Grandpa Joe's leg went green and black, and we feared he was going to die and had to cut it off too. Me and Pa went back to the swamp, looking for more special critters like Snotty. Pa said it was important to help people. We'll be careful, Pa said. Next time will be different.
Antoinette says, I watched a documentary that featured snot otters and began thinking again about how some amphibians are able to regenerate limbs. The next morning I woke up with this story and all its elements and themes fully formed in my head and immediately wrote it down. It was one of the very few times that I didn't have to wrestle a story into shape. What a shape it is, too. For me, this story speaks loudly to our previous two. In fact, it exists very much in conversation, from my perspective, with Bitter is the Sea and Bright. That story is about a cycle of mutually toxic dependency that no one can get off. This is about that cycle beginning and no one wanting to get off. It also has another killer final line in every sense, because when atrocity has a learning curve and a market value, that's a rising tide that crushes all boats. Great work. Thank you all.
Whether it was witchery, some modern science, or a demon let loose from hell, I am unable to decide. Williams Bell, from an authenticated history of the Bell Witch.
Who's there?
From 1817 to 1821, an entity calling itself Kate tormented the Bell family of West Tennessee. There is still no widely accepted explanation for this haunting. Coming summer 2024, on the new hit audio drama Afflicted, the Bell Witch returns to haunt a family in 1960s Tennessee, but only if we raise enough money to pay our cast and crew a living wage. Help bring this haunting to life and snag exclusive rewards like limited edition supporter t-shirts, producer credits, and more at afflictedaudio.com/support. But do it quickly. Some perks are limited only to early supporters.
We rely on you to pay our authors, staff, and cover our costs. There is a recession at the moment, and a pandemic, and a dozen other crises of various sorts, and we know that it's very, very tough. Thank you, all of you who do financially support us. If you don't and are able and would like to, here's how. We have PayPal and Patreon subscriptions that start at $5 a month. They both get you access to our audio archive. The Patreon subscription tiers get you all sorts of goodies at the higher levels too. Actual merch, folks. Please help out if you can. It's really always needed, believe me. And if you can't help out financially, perhaps you could talk about us. Discoverability is the rising tide that lifts all boats. So if you like this story, please talk about it on whatever social media platform isn't on fire this week. Leave a review on your podcatcher of choice or on iTunes. Put it on your blog, because those are coming back now. Newsletters, I know a bit about them. They're good fun. Wherever you want to. Enthusiasm catches. If you like something and you want to tell people about it, they'll come check it out. And that helps us out so much. So if you can, please support us financially. And if you can't support us financially, please support us by telling folks how much fun these stories are, how much you like them. And that will help too. Regardless, thank you. And if you can help in any way, please do. PseudoPod is part of the Escape Artists Federation, a 501c3 non-profit. And this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. PseudoPod returns next week with the milestone 875th episode to celebrate a two-part story. The Lodger by Marie Belloc Lowndes, read for us by Siobhan Gallican, and hosted by the fantastic Tin and Dweeb, with Chelsea on production once again. We will see you then. But for now, to steal my favourite joke from the Meg, Finn.
An arm appeared from nowhere on the shape, seemingly projected like the pseudopod of a protozoan.
It's a pseudopod. It's a big foot.
It's all about podcasts these days.